What is going on, my AI squad? Hope you guys are doing well. It is time for the December meta report for DC Dual Force. Now, with some changes that's been happening, we actually have a more diverse meta. Some slight nerfs to Batman kinda actually etched him out just a little bit, a fraction, but he's still very prevalent. Not as prevalent as the months before though. Now, in this case, we actually do have quite a few decks here, and these decks are actually ones that you're definitely going to be seeing on the ladder a lot. Now, there's still about 2 more weeks of the ladder still left to go before our next set comes out. And it's not a mini set, it's actually a full set. Now, at this time, we don't know how many cards that is, nor do we know how many leaders that's going to be. But the key is, a lot of new decks are going to be coming about at the beginning of the year, beginning of January, and I'm looking forward to it because whatever we're having in this meta right now is totally going to be different from a month from now as we get more cards, more leaders, more ideas, and shifts to things in all kinds of different directions. So definitely in next month's time, there's going to be a lot of new things. But for right now, let's go over what's been happening here in this season. First things first, Shazam Batman, still one of the top decks that you're going to find on a ladder. It's still one of the top decks in this meta. The key is that even though Batman might have had some slight shifts to things like tear gas and bandages and healing, we still have nothing been touched on Shazam. And with the fact that honestly bolts have been getting, as time goes on, more and more consistent, I mean, it is actually not as difficult as it was before to get these bolts. So yet again, this deck still is one of the top, if not the top deck in this meta, yet again. And honestly, you just gotta be careful. You really gotta be careful. Anticipate the fact that they might be starting off with Pedro. Anticipate the fact that, you know, they may get bolts to the cows come home and bolt after bolt after bolt over and over again as a finisher, on top of maybe even having the flash to go down. So have a watchful eye for this deck because it's still a nuisance, but hopefully maybe a month from now with a lot of different changes, that won't be the case. Now, before we go on to the next decks, let's address the pink elephant in the room. This month was the month of Aquaman. And of course, leads to a diverse meta because even though there's been some touches to Batman, Aquaman has kind of stepped in because he, even though got nerfed in several of the sea creatures, was given a lot of new cards to utilize in making more sea creatures and actually ways to buff those sea creatures and creating more of a threat on the board and more of a presence. The reason why I disclaimer this is because, to be honest, Aquaman, pretty much the next decks are Aquaman plus X. Because you're going to see a lot of decks out there. You're going to see Aquaman with almost any leader. You're going to see Aquaman, I've seen with Shazam, I've seen with Zatanna, I've seen with Batgirl, Batman. I mean, I don't think there's a single leader that hasn't been in one way or another combined with Aquaman that people have experimented with, done things with. And some of the top ones, especially at the beginning of the month, a lot of people were trying out Aquaman and Black Adam, although you don't really see that as much nowadays. So thus, I'm not really going to focus on that one, but there's 2 decks I definitely want to focus on right now because those seem to be some of the top ones that you'll see right now on the ladder. Now, I would say this one is no surprise, but yet again, Aquaman and Batman. Even though we have Batman and Aquaman back here in the meta, the key is, it's not necessarily the same deck that it was a month or so ago. With the inclusion of the new cards, you're definitely going to see a lot more of things experimented with. You might see some with Dolphin, you might see some with Volko, and definitely you're going to see a lot of Atlantas as they get more and more consistent, as they try to flood the board, and then the Batman side to try to kind of rain down support with the gadgets and or tactics cards. So overall, it's still within the meta, but honestly nowhere near as bad as it was, I would say, like a month or so ago. Now, this deck has definitely come back as a surprise of Aquaman and Batgirl. Now, way back in the day, this was definitely a deck that was kind of played a little bit here. More so Batgirl with Wonder Woman, but after Wonder Woman was nerfed, there was some experimentation with Aquaman, but it just wasn't there. but now it's way more prevalent. When you have tools of the new cards, Dolphin, Volko, and even Atlanta, all of them are deploy cards. And because they're being experimented with and utilized with Aquaman, hey, who's the best in deploying? Batgirl. Even if you're able to high roll by getting 10th metal, putting out Atlanta, Batgirl on Atlanta, have a board full of sea creatures that have way more attack than they should have. This is something that a lot of people are kind of looking for, that surprise factor. Yeah, even though you're kind of surprised seeing Batgirl with Aquaman, you kind of know what to expect. And thus, as a pilot of this deck, you really want to try to get Atlanta or hit some of these very powerful deploys, so then it's easier for you to steamroll and win the game. Otherwise, if you're really are missing out on some deploys, or if you miss out on some key cards, you kind of open yourself up with the weakness of Batgirl, and having 17 health, also having the 3 charge on both leaders, that you can die if you don't get what you want or what you're looking for, especially if RNG is not on your side. But there is a very high roll potential with this deck, and thus, honestly, it's a lot of fun to pilot. But definitely be very careful, because there is the potential of doing very good or doing very bad. Now, the aggro for this month has definitely have to go to Joker and Batgirl. Now, granted, you will still see some, and I mean some, Doomsday flashes on the ladder, but I will say it's definitely nowhere near as prevalent as we have seen in months before. This specific one is my own creation, which I actually will make a video on in the future. But this deck is so surprising how much it's actually, even though Joker is RNG dependent, it kind of is consistent, which is, it's kind of hard to really say. Batgirl utilizes one of 3 things. One, you either A, get Jailbreak, and through Jailbreak, which is a silver card, you can put more units on the board and allow Joker to hit his shots. 2, Black Manta. Either you get Black Manta and do the surprise 10 damage, that's without firepower buffs. Even with firepower buffs, that would be even higher, but you can do a surprising amount of damage to a single leader and honestly pretty much nuke a leader down. Or 3, you have Parasite, and Parasite punishes your opponent if they've actually developed the board. So when facing against Batgirl Joker, you don't know what to prepare for, because you may want to flood the board and be like, okay, let me have a big presence. But then if they have Parasite, they play Parasite and double up on Parasite, you have to deal with a very big swole unit on the board. Plus, here you have Joker shots to clear up anything that might be still alive, have 1 health or something, as well as hit the leaders. So it's honestly hard to predict when you're facing against Batgirl Joker, what are they gonna have? What should you prepare for? Should you put a lot of units on the board so then that way you have a presence to beat down these leaders? Or should you not have a presence on the board thinking they have Parasite, but then they plop down Black Manta and just take out one of your leaders, or close to taking out one of your leaders? And then you have Ventriloquist, you have the firepower units, you have so many different things to worry about when you're facing against this deck that it's hard to really anticipate how are you going to dismantle what you're coming up against. So it's definitely a very RNG yet consistent deck. So it's very kind of funny to say, but it does have those qualities about it. So right now, Batgirl Joker is probably the predominant aggro deck that is in this meta, and actually been carrying a lot of people to World's Finest, including myself. Now, the final deck I'm going to give as an honorable mention. I think it would go without saying without me touching up on this deck, because this is the deck that's been slowly creeping up the ladder, kind of that one hidden in the corner, whispered in the dark rooms, and honestly could be the next Doomsday Flash if this meta was not changing with more cards coming out. The key is this deck right here, which honestly you wouldn't think about. Joker Hal Jordan can absolutely explode and honestly do more damage than the previous deck I talked about, Batgirl Joker. Now, this specific deck is a fellow creator P2 Random's version was given to me, and you know, I was told to actually play with this deck, check it out. I honestly played this deck for the first time and won so many games for several hours straight. Now, there is an RNG aspect to it when having specific cards. The focus of this deck is the firepower units. Of course, Hal Jordan gives you an extra resource, and honestly, when you have that extra resource, you can play down multiple firepower units and then use Joker and then actually clear things up with things like Lightning Arc, with Cosmic Staff. You can actually have like +4 firepower, +5 firepower, some crazy firepower numbers that you wouldn't normally get with this combo. And thus, that is what actually is being super explosive, that you got to be very careful because you can't really play around it as much as you would with some Doomsday, Flash. Even though it's the same regions, you still have energy, you still have anarchy, as in Flash and Doomsday. Now, you can brick. You can actually have a really bad hand and then honestly be like, dang it, you know, you don't have your firepower, you don't have Cosmic Staff, you just don't have the cards that you really need to. You know, whatever that happens, just GG, go next, and a lot of the times your next card is going to end up being a lot better. This deck is probably one of the decks that actually favors you going second. You actually, if you go second, that is your high roll. Going first actually hurts you more than going second with this deck. Now, granted, there's still a lot of things out there. There's still Hugo Strange out there that can lower and mess up your charges. And there's a lot of things that can contend with you, but honestly, you can definitely high roll with this deck a lot more than you think you normally could. And like I said, I went from having no idea how this deck is played to just winning for several hours without a single loss before we finally started getting some bricked hands. Be very careful of this deck, because if this deck starts getting very popular, gains a lot of traction, it could be the next Doomsday Flash. Give it up for P2 Random for this version, but honestly, any version that includes firepower, includes Hal, includes Joker, you could probably make your own and not have this specific one and still be okay. So that right there is the December meta report. Let me know what you guys think. You could agree, you could disagree, but honestly, these are some very strong decks, and if you're still trying to climb the ladder, hey, take one of them for a spin and see if it helps you out. This is a very diverse meta. There is a lot more decks out there. So definitely, hey, check out a deck, have fun with it, climb that ladder, get to World's Finest, because in a couple of weeks, we're gonna get a lot more cards and we're gonna absolutely have an entirely different meta, entirely different game to play as more cards come out and a whole new set comes out. And for those that did not see my previous video, the next set is called Titans Together and focuses, seems like, on the Teen Titans with what we've seen teased with Slade / Deathstroke and probably some other Teen Titans, especially with a Teen Titan moniker. I'm looking forward to seeing what they have in store for us. But make sure you guys like the video. Make sure you guys are subscribed for more as we do more meta reports and we do more videos to kind of help you guys out to be even better players. You guys take care of yourselves, be safe, and Lord willing, we will see you next time. Bye for now.
This ain't what you want, bitch, I'm a fucking phenomenon.